Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 824 for the 21st of July, 2024. Lots of numbers there. Richard Saunders coming to you from a, looking out the window, cool, crisp, slightly windy, but sunny Sydney, Australia. Coming up on this week's show, can you prove there is no such thing as the afterlife? Well, if you can do that, I don't know how you would go about doing that, but if you can do that, you could possibly win, 20 years ago, $1 million. What's this all about? Well, let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a retired lawyer in Sydney by the name of Victor Zammit, who seemed to be very impressed by the cavalcade of psychic performers doing the rounds, and he was very convinced that the afterlife was real, which he's entitled to do, and he had some sort of bizarre challenge to close-minded materialistic skeptics to prove his case wrong. We read about this in the pages of The Skeptic, and indeed Tim Mendham will read you the story written by the late Barry Williams here in Australia, all about this so-called challenge of Victor Zammit. So we do start with the Book of Tim, and following Tim's reading, I chat with Tim about this, the implications, the ins and outs, and other matters of skeptical interest about psychics and astrology. I travelled up to the Skeptic headquarters here in Sydney to chat to Tim Mendham. After that, we have Adrienne Hill reading the Australian Skeptics newsletter, which of course is written by Tim Mendham. And following that, we look at media astrologers from the past, going back 40-odd years. Something like that. This has been inspired by the recent story you would have heard last week of the TV network here in Australia having regular astrology segments on their news bulletin. The Media Watch program, the ABC television program here in Australia, which has for many decades been looking at media matters with a critical eye, looked at this issue too. I will link to that story in this week's show notes so you can see what the general consensus of this appallingly stupid idea is here in Australia. I don't think it'll last long. You know, it's been a lot of negative backlash against it, but maybe the people at the network are thinking, well, any publicity is good publicity. Well, that's enough for me at the moment. It's time for me to run downstairs. I wonder what's in the fridge. I'm going to make myself a cheese and mustard toasted sandwich. How about that? While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham.
Hi, my name is Tim Mendham. I'm the editor of Australian Skeptics magazine, The Skeptic, and I'm Executive Officer of Australian Skeptics Inc. And today I'll be reading from a fairly old copy of the magazine that came out in summer 2001, which would be by memory of the time because they call it summer rather than a volume number. I think that's volume 21, number 4, but it's summer 2001. You can look it up if you like to see what it is. And this was an article about a particular challenge that came into us, and we look at challenges all the time, and this one was interesting from a particular perspective, which will become obvious. It's written by Barry Williams, who was the then president and editor of the magazine, sadly passed away, but most skeptics of a certain age will remember Barry quite well, hopefully pleasantly, not always. Anyway, challenging times. Australian Skeptics has for several years challenged proponents of testable psychic or paranormal claims to substantiate their claims under controlled conditions offering the prospect of winning $100,000. That's Australian dollars. James Randi and the James Randi Educational Foundation have an even longer running offer, now standing at $1 million. That's actually now been cancelled because with the death of James. And other groups around the world have made similar offers for varying sums. To date, there have been no successful claims on any of these offers. However, in a recent flurry of publicity, one Victor Zammit, a retired Sydney solicitor, has apparently decided to take the Skeptics on at their own game and has issued a challenge of his own. It appears on his website, which still exists, www.victorzammit, that's Zammit with a Z and double M.com, $1 million challenge to disprove evidence of life after death. A reward of $1 million is offered to any skeptic anywhere in the world who can rebut and refute beyond absolute all the evidence for the existence of the afterlife. Is that clear? Mr. Zammit seems to hold the opinion that all the skeptics' challenges are somewhat unfair to, quote, talented psychics, though his stated reasons for so believing are, to say the least, unconvincing. He offers his counter-challenge in the following terms. Why the challenge? The $1 million reward is guaranteed by 4 Sydney lawyers, including myself, all experts in evidence. Well, that's a relief. It's nice to know that the loot is guaranteed by experts in evidence. However, further reading of Mr. Zammit's site leads one to the suspicion that he simply doesn't comprehend the difference between evidence, as it might apply to a legal case, and how it does apply in a properly conducted scientific investigation. In a somewhat imperfect analogy, let's look at this in terms he might understand. Suppose that a crime is discovered somewhere in Australia. It is the role of the Crown prosecutor, to gather and interpret evidence that points to a likely perpetrator, someone they have reason to suppose might have been responsible, to lay charges against the accused person, to present the evidence in a court in such a way that the impartial adjudication process will be satisfied that the case is proven. Note that in this instance, the responsibility for proving the case rests entirely with the Crown, the claimant. Ideally, the defendant, the skeptic, is not required by law to do anything, and again, ideally, he is protected by the presumption of innocence, which is the null hypothesis. Similarly, if a claim is made about some alleged paranormal ability, the burden of proof rests solely with the claimant. The skeptic is required to do nothing. Put simply, our challenge to the paranormalist amounts to: you claim to be able to levitate? Well, levitate. You claim to be able to predict the future? Well, predict. You claim that there is life after death? Well, give us the evidence. At base, skeptics' challenges simply require people to do what they claim they can do. We ask claimants to specify not only what results they expect from a test, but also what results would convince them they are wrong. And prior to any test, skeptics always ask claimants if they agree that it will be a fair test of their claims. Consequently, the results of any such test should be in no doubt to any observer. Mr. Zammit requires anyone seeking to take his challenge to refute beyond absolute, whatever that means, every little thing he, Zammit, can think of that he believes to be evidence of an afterlife. In fact, what he is doing is to ask the skeptic to prove a universal negative, an impossible task. He also seeks to reverse the burden of proof. Worse still, he proposes an adjudication panel to decide whether or not the claimant has won his challenge. This is where the analogy with the law breaks down. Far from being an objective process, as envisaged in a skeptic's challenge, his challenge will be decided purely by the subjective opinions of the adjudicators, of whom he is one. It's as though in a criminal trial the defence was entitled to appoint both a judge and a jury of its choosing, and to be the sole arbiter of what evidence was admissible. This is hardly a model one would expect to result in a fair trial, and it is nothing like a method by which one would conduct any sort of scientific experiment. Not only does he wish to stack the jury, he also reserves the sole right to decide what evidence is allowed and who will be allowed to give it. Much of Zammit's website is taken up with promoting his book on the subject. together with cataloguing his own legal successes. He might well be as distinguished a legal practitioner as he claims to be, but that is entirely irrelevant to what he is proposing here. Expertise or distinction in one specialist field is no guarantee even of competence in an unrelated field, a fact that seems to have escaped Mr. Zammit. Indeed, it is explicitly ignored by him. Among the experts he quotes to support his belief is Professor Brian Josephson, who shared a Nobel Physics Prize for his work on superconductors. Professor Josephson has since gained some notoriety in scientific circles for his support of various psi phenomena. Whether or not this notoriety is warranted, as he has done nothing to demonstrate the existence of such purported phenomena, his belief in them is irrelevant to their existence. Zammit further adduces, in support of his case, claims by all manner of either expert witnesses such as Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Sir William Crookes and Sir Oliver Lodge, all distinguished late 19th century literary or scientific figures who are all famously sucked in by the then popular but long since discredited spiritualist movement. More importantly, he simply ignores any contrary evidence, which he characterises as being the work of, quote, closed-minded hardcore skeptics, close quote. In fact, anyone who disagrees with Mr. Zammit is so characterised. He seems to harbour an intense dislike for all skeptics, but above all, for James Randi. Apart from the experts who might have some skills in scientific fields, Zammit also mentions with approval such luminaries as Edgar Cayce, whom he spells C-A-S-E-Y instead of C-A-Y-C-E, indicating that he is working from hearsay and hasn't actually seen the name in print. Nostradamus, yes, really. Various Indian guides of long-deceased spirit mediums, Sai Baba and other charlatans. He even appears to believe that a claimed increase in the belief in the afterlife among the US population is somehow evidence in support of his case. A strange assumption even for a solicitor. However, he goes further than merely accepting all manner of dubious claims at face value. He has even distilled some wisdom from a raft of them, allowing him to postulate 7 laws of psychic energy. The first of these is actually true. All solid objects are vibrating energy. A profound discovery when Einstein first postulated it, but fatuous in this context and in stark contrast to those which follow. Law 2, for instance, states the mind is an energy station which creates, transmits and receives energy. And subsection to that 1, the will of the mind can change the form of energy. 2, thoughts, which are waves of energy, can be transmitted to and from human minds within the earth plane and to human and other entities within the afterlife in a process called telepathy. It's all downhill from there. The 7th in the series probably sums them up pretty well. Energy is a boomerang. The energy you give out will return to you. Profound, what? I'd like to suggest a somewhat more useful observation from Mr. Zammit and others who engage in similar fantasies. Reality has a nasty habit of belting you over the head when you least expect it. We all know that some lawyers tend towards the prolix, but Mr. Zammit's website takes this to hitherto unheard of lengths. He makes much of the claim that his challenge has been running for some 300 days, and so far no closed-minded materialist skeptic has beaten the psychic's $1 million challenge. The materialists, closed-minded skeptics, continue to fail to win the $1 million reward. I suppose to some people, if he had nothing much to say, then saying it twice, and with the words in a different order, and with bad spelling and grammar, adds to its gravity. Maybe that works in a court of law, though I doubt it, but it does nothing to disguise the fact that Zammit's challenge to skeptics is no challenge at all. Nobody is likely to indulge Mr. Zammit's vanity by engaging in his exercise in self-promotion, for that is all it is. Far be it for this humble skeptic to tell Mr. Zammit, a highly qualified lawyer and self-professed expert in evidence, how to conduct his business. But the evidence he proffers here, relating to his understanding of the nature of scientific investigations, would indicate that, putting it with all the delicacy we can muster, he would know his arse from his elbow. And that's Challenging Times from the Skeptic magazine, Volume 21, Number 4, which was in summer 2001, called Challenging Times, And you can read that on our website. You just download that issue of the magazine for free, along with virtually every other issue of the magazine for free from www.skeptics.com.au and look for the magazine tag. It's something we do. You don't charge you for it. We do keep the 4 most recent issues available only to subscribers. We've got to offer them something. But there's a lot of reading there to do, and it certainly will keep you down the rabbit hole for a long, long time.
Thank you, Tim, for the Book of Tim. I'm with Tim Mendham in the north side Skeptic Zone studios.
No, it's the basement level.
The basement
of Skeptic Towers. I'd normally let you into the penthouse on the 358th floor, but we just washed it.
Oh, I see. Well, yes, I'm at Skeptics headquarters to record this. Now, the reason that we're talking about Victor Zammit is I've been recently archiving lots of things, which I do regularly, and I came across in an edition of the Psychics Directory, the Australian Psychics Directory, dated from 2011, an article about the man himself, Victor Zammit, who that year entered the Psychics Hall of Fame. There you go. I'm just noticing here. 2011 Hall of Fame, Victor Zammit. It says here, Victor Zammit and his wife Wendy have been life members of APA, Australian Psychics Association, I guess. Yes, for over 20 years. Victor is one of the greatest proponents for the afterlife in the world today. He is constantly researching methods of communicating with the afterlife, with the aim of broadening our knowledge of such things.
That hall, by the way, that Victor Zammit now appears in the Psychics, is very, very long.
Is it?
Almost you couldn't avoid being in it.
Yes,
if you were a psychic in Australia. Eventually you're going to get there.
Victor's own paranormal experiences prompted his research into psychic phenomena, looking at the objective evidence for the existence of the afterlife. And it goes on as a solicitor. And it says here 10 years ago, so this is about the time that Barry wrote 10 years previous, which you were reading from 2001. This is 2011. 10 years ago, he put his research into a book called A Lawyer Presents the Case for the Afterlife, which he makes available free of charge, goodness me, to people worldwide via his website, victorzammit.com. So there we go. But later on in this, and then actually it goes on to talk about his wife, but later on in this issue of the magazine, we have an interview.
Oh.
Meet the 2011 Psychic Hall of Fame inductees. And there's an interview. I'll just read some of this. Victor Zammit and his wife, and it just repeats what we've heard. And this is conducted by one Simon Turnbull, who we both knew.
The late Simon Turnbull.
The late Simon Turnbull. I think he died roughly 10 years ago, who was the president or the leader of that, or the head of the Psychics Association, which largely was a phone a psychic business. For many years, everything they did was to promote phone a psychic.
And especially promoting Simon Turnbull. Too.
And especially promoting Simon Turnbull. But yeah, it was a big business in the day. 1-800 numbers, or what, I can't remember what they used to call them, 25 cents a minute, 60, I can't remember what the cost was, but the idea was you keep talking to people and the money
it racks up the charge.
Racks up. So Simon was interviewing Victor Zammit, and I must say that we've had a look at his website. I mean, I haven't looked at his website for probably over a decade, but he's claiming that he has definite proof for the afterlife, includes him getting visitations from, if I remember correctly, was it Harry Houdini, or I can't. It says it also on his website. Mock trials where he's cross-examining people like James Randi, and
cross-examining dead people or cross-examining real life?
Well, in the time, James Randi was, but he writes the script on both sides. So he plays the prosecutor or the cross-examiner, and of course it makes them out to look to be flustering, closed-minded, materialistic skeptics.
Right, yes.
But yeah, I remember this prize was, when I was doing the TV show 10 years ago, whenever it was, more than one of the psychics on the TV show would come to me and say, well, the skeptics haven't beaten our challenge, have they? Whenever I raised James Randi's $1 million or our $100,000 prize, they'd say, well, we're equal because the skeptics can't beat our challenge. And I couldn't get through to them how,
It's like saying a challenge is enough, regardless of the parameters of the challenge and understanding what a challenge is.
Understanding how it works.
As that article by Barry Williams said, it's the claimant who has to prove their case in a court of law and in a skeptic's challenge, a scientific challenge. You can't just come along and say, disprove me.
Yeah.
It's no, you have to prove you.
It's the basic concept. So here Simon is interviewing Victor Zammit and his wife, it appears. Simon Turnbull says, both of you have done a lot of upsetting of the skeptics over the years. Now, I'll stop here and say that was one of the biggest things that the late Simon Turnbull harped on about. He was always attacking us every opportunity, as if by attacking us, it was somehow putting his case for the afterlife or psychics in general, what they do. What I mean by that is instead of simply presenting the evidence, he'd spend all his time attacking skeptics any way he could.
I visited him once.
It was
in his
a
house,
mindset.
actually. I visited him once.
Did you?
Yeah, he used to live near where I was, actually. I had to deliver something to him and went to his flat, actually, as it was, or a unit or apartment, on a bit of a hill above Manly, the Sydney suburb of Manly.
Oh, yeah.
And it was quite interesting to be there. It wasn't there long, I must admit. I don't think he wanted me there long. But it was quite interesting to see Simon Turnbull in his natural habitat.
Oh, right. Well, I mean, I dealt with him a lot. He worked on the TV show. I would meet him mostly in TV studios because we ended up doing quite a few interviews together. Because you know how it works. The TV show will run a story about psychics and they'll say, we need a psychic and a skeptic. And I'd turn up and invariably Simon Turnbull would be there. And he was good-natured enough.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, just to chat with, as long as you took him with a grain of salt and realised, but he was, very active in his condemnation of the skeptical movement.
I was finding he sort of put on an act of being amenable and everything like that. I actually found him very smug.
Yes.
I mean, people often accuse the skeptics of being smug about their beliefs. Simon Turnbull was...
He was smug.
He was a definite... Was he a believer, do you think? It's okay, he's dead, we can say whatever we like.
I know, but you ask a really good question. I think to an extent, but business is business.
I think business was very much business, and what I've heard from other psychics, the way he ran the Australian Psychics Association was very, he and his wife, who I presume is still alive, but it was very sort of demanding, making demands of the people who wanted to be members of it.
That may be the case. I don't know that side of it, but yes, he came across... Look, we had to work together on occasion, so you have to behave.
Yes.
In
back
some
to
respects.
Victor Zammit.
Anyway, so Simon says to Victor and his wife, both of you have done a lot of upsetting of the skeptics over the years, and Victor says, our pleasure always. So,
Nice.
And Simon says they're not getting away with as much as they used to.
Well, we're getting away with it. The skeptics are getting away with it.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So that was his attitude. The attitude that the skeptics were busily trying to undermine, hoodwink, skullduggery, bad behaviour. So we're not getting away with that because those psychics are on our case.
Not exactly an open-minded, sort of disinterested observer of it.
And Victor says, no, in the old days when I first came into this, they were ruling the world, but not now.
Oh, if only.
If only, eh? That's right. And Simon says, having spoken at a couple of skeptics conferences myself, I don't remember him being...
I can't remember, no. I'll look it up, though.
Yeah. I noticed that there are only a few who are really hardcore, whatever that means. The rest are borderline skeptics and they don't really know what to believe. If you scratch a skeptic, there's a believer underneath trying to get out. This is their worldview. The skeptics
are trying to get out of the room.
I mean, a lot of them think that we're deluded.
Yeah, well, they're also sort of pretending to be. They're like it's a pretense to be a skeptic, and that really, as he says, deep down inside would really believe it. It's almost like there's an opportunity there for Simon to make some converts.
Oh, yeah, but he's always...
But you know how many times... You look at Victor Zammit's website, and there's so many people he's quoting there. Some of them are hundreds of years old, actually. And everyone used to be a skeptic. Right? Everyone. I was a skeptic for 40 years, but after all my 300 years of investigation, I'm now convinced. Everyone used to be a skeptic.
Including the dead ones.
Especially the dead ones.
Especially the dead ones. Simon says...
Well, that would convert me if I was dead, actually.
And Simon says here, You are well known as the lawyer who makes an offer of $1 million to any skeptic or anybody who can prove that the afterlife doesn't exist. Victor says, that's right. And Simon says, I understand you've not had any takers yet. To which Victor answers, you can't just say, oh, there's no afterlife. You have to identify where, when, and how, and why the afterlife does not or cannot exist. This is completely backwards.
It is backwards, yes. I mean, sort of, that's the elephant in the room sort of theory. But, prove there's no elephant in the room.
Yeah.
You can't. But interesting, he says that they haven't had any challenges. You could also apply that to a baker whose products are all mouldy. No one's going to come in there and buy some of his mouldy products, right? They're not good. So no one's going to come in for Victor's challenge if you're serious about challenging science.
Yeah.
It's just not going to work.
And his wife says that the evidence for the afterlife just isn't accurate. And Victor says, I started to send out challenge to prominent skeptics about 10 years ago. It's probably why Barry got one. I sent them to people in England and also to those on the east coast of the United States, in New York and Buffalo. So to the psychop
people.
Yeah. I had responses from senior lawyers in the United States saying they couldn't understand what they had to do, no doubt. I told them they had to rebuff the evidence. They had to say why the evidence for the afterlife could not be accepted. And it goes on. I won't continue. But I think, folks, you get... And he goes on ranting about Richard Dawkins. There you go.
Yeah.
And James Randi. And towards the end, he talks about a medium by the name of David Thompson, who I think I've got some files on somewhere in the archives, who, from memory, was a stage psychic, just did a stage routine, but he did materialization, something from the Victorian era or the Edwardian era. And this completely and utterly convinced Victor Zammit. And he talks about him and ectoplasm. It's that level.
That level of spiritual
that level
materialization.
Which convinced him. And he continues to talk about it. Look, folks, it's worth a visit to victorzammit.com. Have a large glass of your favourite beverage.
I should add here that we assume he's still alive.
We assume he's still
Otherwise,
alive.
we would have heard from him.
Yes, that's right. If he was dead, we would have heard from him. Victor Zammit must be quite elderly by now, which is fine. And
He was retired back then, so I mean...
Good health to him. I mean, we don't wish anybody ill, but it's worth visiting these things from time to time because of the bizarre, backwards nature. But they think it was a great gotcha moment for skeptics.
It's a pretty good example, the whole website actually, not just his challenge, but the whole website of how not to think scientifically.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the website, when he's sort of quoting authorities, most of them are believers. Okay, that's fair enough. You would. But he's just basically using response to authority. What's the term? Just naming people is evidence.
It's a logical fallacy. It's called appeal to authority.
Appeal to authority.
Yes. Thank you to Michelle Bickersma for that's wonderful.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what he does most of the site. He's just say these people, and some of them we know, but some of them are pretty obscure.
Yeah.
Right? He's obviously done a lot of reading, but some of them are obscure. Some of them we know quite well, like Charles Tartan and Puthoff and that sort of people, and a lot of people that we just would not consider valid researchers, actually, for various reasons.
Yeah.
But and you wonder about, is he referring to them because they believe, or is he referring to them because they're good researchers? Well, it has to be because they believe. Yeah. And because this bunch of people, he has long lists, all believe, that's the weight of evidence. And as I always say when I talk to people about Bigfoot or something, 1 bad photo, 5 bad photos doesn't make a good photo.
Yeah.
Right? So 5 bits of evidence, 5 claimants, 5 experts doesn't make a great expert.
And you mentioned the elephant. What occurs to me was the Carl Sagan's dragon in the garage.
That's right.
In the demon-haunted world. I have a dragon in my garage, proof it's not there. Well, let's open the door. It's not here. It's invisible. All right, well, let's use infrared camera.
Yeah.
Not there. It's immune to that.
That's why the skeptics, we have a pretty straightforward challenge. You say, as Barry Williams said in his article, you say you can do something.
Do it.
Do it.
Do it. Yeah.
I mean, I can sum up skepticism in 9 words. You say you can fly. I say, Show me.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. It's really simple. It's not hard.
Yeah.
And then we've got to figure out the circumstances in which you do it. So we have to manage to wheedle out any sort of potential fakery or hoodwinkery or anything like
Which
that.
doesn't happen much.
No, it doesn't. Most of the people who come to us are genuine.
They're genuine.
Right?
Well,
But-
sincere, we should say.
Okay.
Sincere.
Okay. They're sincere.
Yes.
Yes. They're not genuinely the people who can do something necessarily.
Or not yet, anyway.
But anyway, but no, most of the ones I get, they might be a bit troubled, some of them, but they are very sincere. And when we say just show what you can do, for them, it's rather hard to pin down exactly what they can do half the time.
To many of them, it's never occurred to them to demonstrate it in this fashion because they just assume they can do it.
Yeah.
Like the water diviner, the rods move.
Yeah.
My water divining rods move. Hello, skeptics, where's my money?
Yeah, well, that's that. I receive all these challenges to me. I receive at least one a week, actually, from people who get very outraged if you ask them for evidence. But are you doubting me?
Yeah.
I've had one recently who got very upset,
Really?
calling me all sorts of names, saying, my word is my bond. If I say I can do it, I can do it. And you try and point out, which you probably don't. You don't bother getting back to some of these people, quite frankly, because it's obviously a lost cause. The argument's not going to go very far. But you try and say to them, in a scientific test, your word means nothing, right? You got to do it.
How dare you?
I know. It's not that you're confident you can do it. You have to prove it. And proving it has no relevance to what I believe, what you believe, what anyone else. You do it under conditions that are agreed by people beforehand.
Yeah.
And but that's
And again, it's nothing personal. This is the same.
whereas obviously what Zammit is talking about is very personal.
Oh, yeah. Wow. This is one of the reasons that I keep and collect archives. It's really worth it. And as the years go by, we have more and more to draw on. When we come, let's talk briefly about talking about archives and why we keep things. Is you would have heard on the Skeptic Zone last week, and I know you're familiar with this story, is Channel 7 News are having a weekly astrologer now, or a daily even. Just before the weather, before the commercial break before the weather, they said, well, coming up in Sydney's weather, blah, 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 more after the break, and then 20 seconds of horoscopes.
Text, isn't it? It's actually
just text.
Now, I have to
with
point out,
music.
this is not the little magazine tabloid type news program. This is the main evening news, right? So it's supposed to have prestige and authority.
You would hope.
Yeah, you would hope. And then sticking in an astrology column in that context
Yeah.
is a worry.
So I'll read out some of the bits of astrology as shown on Channel 7 Evening News from one Natasha Weber, otherwise known as Astro Tash.
Not AstroTurf.
Not AstroTurf. No. Astro Tash as a light plane flies over, but maybe she could have predicted that for us. I don't know. These appeared on the 7 Nightly News on the 16th of July. You know what? I won't read out what the star signs are. I'll let people at home listening to this see if does this apply to you. Here's one star sign: dream big. Tomorrow could. Oh, I'll add some music. Dream big. Tomorrow could spark a groundbreaking idea that shifts your entire perspective.
Could, couldn't it?
Okay.
Right.
Now, what star sign do you think that was for, Tim? Have a guess.
All of them?
All of them. You're right. It's just repeated. That was Aries, but the rest is just as banal. I mean, it's beyond. It's made the hardworking people at Channel 7 cringe, I'm sure, and it's made Channel 7 at the moment their news service a laughingstock.
Yeah.
In the general media.
It is
sad.
It's the state of journalism, if you can call it evening news journalism, is rather sad that they have to go with this audience baiting aspect.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Tim, for the Book of Tim, for Victor Zammit and Astrology, and we look forward to the next edition.
And I might let you out of the basement of Skeptics Towers, actually. Just use this door.
Hey, Adrienne.
Hi, Susan. Out for some shopping, eh?
Yep, I'm stocking up on this imitation maple syrup from Australia.
Imitation? Imitation? No. You need to buy the real thing from Canada.
But I saw the TV commercial and it said that noted pancake eating expert Richard Saunders says it's the best maple syrup money can buy, and 60% of people preferred it in a blind taste test. Everyone knows it's the best.
Oh, come on, Susan. You know better than that. That's the argument from authority.
It is?
Or is it the argument from popularity? It might be another logical fallacy. I'm not sure.
Really? If only we had a way of finding out.
Hello, everyone.
Oh my, it's the skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet.
Yes, that's right. But how did you know who I am?
I listened to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Also, didn't you used to be the tooth fairy?
Oh, yes. I remember you. I'll never forget your left upper lateral incisor. Would you like it back?
No, it's okay. You keep it.
Hey, skeptical fairy godmother angel, what are you doing here in the supermarket?
I've come to tell you that you can find out about 40 different logical fallacies on YouTube in one handy location. Listen to each one to hear an explanation and examples of how they might be used.
Oh.
Just go to tinyurl.com/logicalzone and you'll find all the logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma with handy time codes to get to the exact one you want.
Who is Michelle Bickersma?
Oh, just a friend of mine.
tinyurl.com/logicalzone. Thank you, skeptical fairy godmother angel. I guess you'll disappear in a puff of smoke and thunder now, eh?
Not quite yet. I have a bit of shopping to do. Susan?
Yes?
Where do I find the Australian maple syrup?
What? No. Come with me, so-called skeptical fairy. This is real maple syrup from Canada. Made with real maple. Hello, this is Adrienne Hill from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada, and I'm glad to be here reading the highlights from the Australian Skeptics newsletter. Always makes me smile. Thanks, Tim. This is newsletter number 201, and remember, you can subscribe to this newsletter and receive it every other week in your inbox. The full newsletter includes more stories and links to all the stories mentioned. But now, let's see what Tim Mendham has for us this time. Hi all, says Tim. As soon as Donald Trump escaped from an assassination attempt, the conspiracy theories started. It was a stage setup, Manchurian Candidate style. It was the left, or the right, or Joe Biden, or satanic pedophiles. We're waiting for Ross Coulthart to claim it was aliens, or anti-aliens. Now it looks like it was a sad loner, but that won't stop the theorists. Read on, Tim. Okay, Tim, I'll do just that. Skepticon 2024, Sydney, November 23rd through 24th. Tickets will be available soon for the convention in Sydney, with a speaker list growing by the day. Skepticon 2024 will run from November 23rd through 24th at the Guthrie Theatre, University of Technology, Sydney, with an opening function at the Occidental Hotel in York Street, Wynyard, on the evening of November 22nd, the Friday preceding the convention. Tickets for the convention and the program of speakers will be available later this month. TV channel's Astrology on nightly news. One thing to have an astrologer on a morning tabloid program, but including a segment in the main evening news has received appropriate ridicule online. Quote, 7 West Media's editor-in-chief, Anthony DeSegli, said his team was exploring new ideas and concepts, end quote. Listeners will know of Richard Saunders' thoughts on this from last week's episode. And I second those thoughts. Biden hit with directed energy weapons. It seems social media users are convinced Biden's stumbles in the recent live debate with Donald Trump might be evidence of Havana syndrome. So it's not old age, I guess, then. Coulthard claims Trump is in danger through UFO knowledge. The UFO community's current favorite conspiracist, Ross Coulthard, and last year's winner of the Skeptics Bent Spoon Award, is now claiming that Donald Trump is in fear for his life because of what he knows about UFOs, or UAPs. At the tail end of a 1.5-hour presentation to the Scientific Coalition of UFO Studies convention in May and June, he says at the 1 hour, 38 minute, 18 second mark, quote,
"He's scared. He's scared they're going to kill him if he reveals what he knows. That's what I've been told. I'm not kidding you. I'm not making this up."
End quote. The June 2024 issue of The Skeptic is out in digital and hard copy format. It features a look at pre-Darwin evolutionaries, those who predated the famous exposition of the theory with pronouncements of their own. We also look at the checkered history of Alfred Russel Wallace, the fellow traveler on the road to natural selection, but whose heritage was tarnished with strange ideas. The issue also features a discussion on the reality of toxoplasmosis. What role cats? A pseudo-archaeology pioneer with an evil twist. The Havana Syndrome scare, a Swedish pseudoscience of character assessment, and much more. So if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time to do so. You can sign up for a hard copy or digital edition, or both, since the digital is offered free to those who take up the hard copy version. New subscriptions start with the next issue, but you can also order a copy of the most recent one as a treat. Contact the editor if you're not sure if your existing subscription needs renewing. Items of interest. 13 secret government UFO programs. Quote, from the United States' infamous Project Blue Book to the UK's discreet DI-55, each program has fueled conspiracy theories and excited ufologists, end quote. Mainly from the US, but a few Brits, a Canadian, and it's not me, and I don't think it's Kat either, Norwegian, French, and one from Brazil. None from Australia. You can tell Higgypop is a wacky radical site, as its bests of lists have 13 entries. Meanwhile, a survey by Higgypop, the same site as the above story, reveals that 68% of UFO believers think governments withhold significant information. But not exactly a disinterested survey group. Travel tip. 13 best UFO skywatch locations in the UK. These are good but isolated sites for night skywatching. No guarantees. The only extraterrestrials you spot may be stars, planets, and the occasional satellite. Real estate opportunity. Wales's most haunted house and most selective ghost. 1.6 million pounds will get you 14 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, 2 sitting rooms, a library, a drawing room, a conservatory, pantry, a self-contained cottage, 8-acre grounds, a secret wood, a walled garden, what is thought to be one of the largest messenger greenhouses in Wales, and a ghost that only appears to unmarried men. Employment opportunity. Jobs available in a real haunted house. The Conjuring House, the, quote, iconic haunted Rhode Island farmhouse where evil happenings, end quote, inspired the 2013 horror movie The Conjuring, is offering 4 new positions: 2 tour guides, a caretaker, and a gamping host. And that's GHAMPING, which apparently is ghost plus camping. I guess it's an alternative to what they call glamping. Silliest story of the week. It pays to be silly. Oh, I'm so silly. I hope I get paid. Our regular holder of the Silliest Story of the Week title, singer and ghost cohabiter Brocard, is now filming a series on paranormal activity. Of course she is. This follows her escalating paranormal experiences, beginning with marriage and divorce from a ghost, her association with a possessed clown doll, and specific tastes in music, the consequent intra-ghost jealousies, and now she is relating her near death from COVID, which gave her a new ability to converse with the dead. Substantiated? Is anything but. Does it matter if you can make a living on the publicity? While we are seriously thinking of giving Brocard a miss in the future to give someone else a chance to be silliest, she is inventive in her ever-increasing claims. Well, that ends another newsletter. And for my next one, I will be in Iceland using my portable Zoom mic that Richard provided me with. Whenever I travel to another country, I always wonder what the differences will be like between there and Canada. For example, will we have to pay to go to the washroom? Or will we have to park our car rental in a parkade? Will they even have parkades? Or will I need to wear a toque, even if it's in the summer? And I can tell you I'll be packing mine just in case. Now, I have talked about toques, or beanies or nice warm hats, and parkades, which are multi-level parking buildings, in past newsletters, but I have not talked about washrooms before. Apparently, according to Wiktionary.org, the term washroom for restroom, bathroom, toilet, loo, etc. originated in the United States, but is less used there now, but is the most common word for a potty room in Canada. The more you know. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill.
This is James Randi, and you're listening to The Skeptic Zone.
Now it's time once again to dive back into the vault, to delve deeply into the treasure which is Australian digitised newspapers. Going back decades, indeed centuries, and what a wealth of information it is, more valuable than gold surely, where we can learn about our history as written by reporters and journalists over the years, especially when it comes to looking at matters concerning what we do, skepticism. Now lately, of course, we've had the story of the TV network engaging an astrologer. A bizarre story indeed, but it made me think, well, what other media astrologers have been used in the past? And I had a look around and I landed in the year 1986, almost 40 years ago, in the pages of the Sun Herald newspaper, dated the 10th of August, 1986. The Sun Herald 4-page lift out Your Money in the Stars. Astrologer on finances for the year. And this revolves around a couple of astrologers, one by the name of Stella Recamier. I don't remember Stella Recamier, but in the 80s at least, she was the resident astrologer for the Sun Herald. I wonder if they still have one to this day. I wouldn't think they do, but you never know. Will the stars shine favourably on your personal finances over the next year? In this special 4-page lift-out, what a treat, the Sun Herald's astrologer, Stella Recamier, and I apologise if that's not how she pronounced her name, or still does, predicts the monetary matters for the 12 star signs, and reporter Jenny Stevens, pictured, a Libran, talks to Stella and 4 of Sydney's top astrologers about their profession and their predictions for the economy. I guess it was a slow news week. Stella predicts massive economic crash. If 1986 is a year of gloom, it is only a prelude of worse things to come, says the Sun Herald's astrologer, Stella Recamier. Stella stands by her 1983 prediction of the biggest economic crash in 100 years by the end of the decade. Do we recall a giant economic crash in the 80s? Scratching my head. The only ray of hope is in the short term. A marginal rise in the dollar, and that's the dollar compared to the Australian dollar compared to the American dollar. A marginal rise in the dollar next March after reaching 50 cents US before Christmas, and an improvement in the rural sector in 1988. There is good news for aspiring or disenchanted politicians. Stella predicts political prominence, or a re-emergence to prominence, for those born at the end of December, particularly in 1929 and 1960. I wonder why. Stella's predictions are uncannily accurate and often unwelcome, ranging from Elizabeth Taylor's failed marriages to the Whitlam sacking and the subsequent turmoil in Parliament. Now, I'll break in here to say the reporter is saying Stella's predictions are uncannily accurate. Really? Is this because Stella told the reporter this, or the reporter just was writing drivel for that week? Who knows? I sincerely doubt the reporter at the time did her due diligence and actually tried to discover if her predictions taken as a whole were uncannily accurate. We read on. Yet, she insists she leads a very quiet suburban life with interests centred on her husband and 3 teenage children. I was always fascinated by anyone or anybody who could pinpoint the future, she says at her Pitt Street office. I think you are born with a certain gift which just emerges. In my case, I was 11. I thought ballet was going to be my career, but I was injured and housebound and spent the summer reading books on astrology. It took quite a few years before I realized I had something, because I had to wait for the predictions to come true. I was always telling my high school friends when they would marry or whether they would be famous. I told a friend when she was 18 she would not marry, and she said she'd prove me wrong. She married a wealthy man but left him on the honeymoon. It was a very blunt way of doing it, and I have learnt to soften my approach. I still tell the truth, but any prediction can be modified by the element of free will, which in some cases can override what is regarded as destiny. In other words, all my predictions are true. It's not my fault if other people have free will. And here we have the next item in this special lift-out. Hawke's future bleak, says Chris. And Hawke was the Australian Prime Minister at the time, Bob Hawke. Chris Turner sees herself as dreadfully normal. There is nothing mystical, she said, about having 2 teenagers, 2 dogs, 2 cats, and a husband, or working for 20 years as a lab technician. People have the idea that astrologers are quite weird, but we're dreadfully normal people with the same problems as everyone else, said the TV Week and 2WS Astrologer. TV Week being at the time a popular weekly magazine with the TV Times in it, and 2WS a station, radio station here in Sydney, or it was at the time. And now that station I think is called WSFM. I got into it because I couldn't believe that it worked, and I wanted to find flaws. I had always been interested in astrology, but it got to the point where I could teach myself only so much. 15 years ago, there were no schools. You had to find out about teachers through friends. This led Chris to press for structured courses for astrologers, and she became the co-founder and senior lecturer of the Sydney Astrological Centre, principal of the Chiron School of Astrology, and a member of the examining board of the Federation of Australian Astrologers. I got into counselling almost by accident when a student insisted on paying me for a consultation. He didn't like what I told him, but recognised it as being true. Most astrologers make enough money to live on, but you certainly don't find a rich astrologer. Most of us are in it for the personal satisfaction, she said. Modern astrologers work rather like weather forecasters. If I see a difficult period coming up, I try to tell that person why they are going to have that difficult period in terms of their growth and personality. I wouldn't call myself psychic, more highly intuitive and good at reading people. Of course, sometimes things come up and I have no idea where they came from, and I blurt them out before I stop and think. Open and talkative, Chris has a reputation among colleagues as an animal and children's astrologer. I seem to be able to handle the light-hearted side of it better. Chris's humour deserts her when it comes to forecasting the coming financial year. My own common sense tells me we are going down very fast, and that is backed up by astrology. Anyone who says we're going to pull out of this in the next financial year is an idiot. I've done Mr. Hawke's chart, and it doesn't look good. If he could start standing up for what he believes in and stop trying to do the right thing by everybody, he might survive. But I have my doubts. If the Labour Party had anyone to take over, he would have been out a year ago. And just to remind Australians and to let everybody else who may not know, Bob Hawke is widely regarded as one of our most popular and beloved prime ministers. He did in retrospect, of course, he is seen to have done a very good job as prime minister. And although these predictions were made in 1986 about doom and gloom, he was prime minister until 1991. And I think the man himself only died a few years ago. Indeed, he died in 2019, aged 89. And now we'll turn to the next section of this riveting lift-out. Stella predicts troubled times. And the picture here is Stella at her desk, presumably Stella Recamier, predicts treachery within the Labour Party against Prime Minister Bob Hawke. And actually that was to come, but not for some years after this publication, where Bob Hawke was voted out by his own party in the end. On these pages, Sun Herald Astrologer Stella Recamier predicts the financial fortunes for the 12 star signs over the next year. Now there is a whole section here which goes through each star sign, but it is what we might call just Pat 101 cartoon astrology. And I won't bother going through all the star signs because it's quite lengthy. But she does make other predictions here. Stella also predicts some turmoil on the nation's economic, political and industrial fronts, which she outlines here. Oh, goody. The government. Unless the government takes drastic steps and reverses its taxation policies and injects more energy into the economy, Australia will gain the unique distinction of being the country that leads all others on the downhill ride to the biggest financial crash. Well, let me see. I don't think the government took dramatic steps to reverse its taxation policies. Therefore, this prediction already has fallen flat. But then again, I guess she could just say, or her ilk could just say, well, people have free will, which overrides destiny or some such rubbish. Bob Hawke, being a highly intuitive man who can detect the first signs of deception long before they make the headlines, Mr. Hawke should retaliate promptly at the slightest hint of treachery within his party, which is bound to arise in mid-October. And without checking too much, the infighting and the jostling for positions in the Labour Party of that era didn't happen for some years after that. But in our system here in Australia, much like the British system, it's always on the card. The leader can be changed. We read on. As he has so much at stake, he should resist any attempts to manoeuvre him into an early election in December or the second quarter of 87, which represents critical times. I'm sure it does. The economy, the latest wheat double cross, is not the last blow to hit Australia, and in the second quarter of 87, we could lose out further. This time with an Oriental country, possibly China, which will withdraw from a trade agreement. The Australian dollar could slide close to 50 cents. It's not that much more at the moment. It's in the mid-60s, I think. Strikes will cause chaos in business during November, with further unrest at the end of December, February and June. The AMA, Australian Medical Association, will be militant with more defiance in February. The end of the 1987 financial year marks a testing time for the government and could involve difficulties in passing a bill. In the near future, there will be a meeting of ideology between the Liberals and the Democrats. The Democrats at the time being a minor Australian political party. I think they're defunct now. John Howard, and he was the leader of the opposition at the time, I believe. He later became Prime Minister. John Howard will start performing shortly, as he and Hawke will become deadlocked in a heated conflict around the long weekend in October. What? Maybe historians can look to see whether that came to fruition. Andrew Peacock will make a crucial political decision before his birthday that could set the pattern for many years, whatever that means. On the bright side, as the economy declines, many people will still make a lot of money in various areas, including takeaway food, and fresh bread outlets will flourish. However, expensive restaurants will have to reposition their place in the market. We should develop tourism and promote Australia as the ideal setting for Hollywood filmmakers. Hear to that. During 87 and 89, we will have several movie blockbusters to our credit. Again, I guess we could look that up to see what movies were made in Australia in those years, which could be considered to be blockbusters. And finally here, and again we're not going to cover the all 12 zodiac signs, we have a list of famous faces of the day. We have 12 famous faces, each one representing a particular star sign. And without going into exactly who these people are for international listeners, I will rattle them off for the benefit of those people from Australia who might remember some of these people. Although some of them, I think, well, one in particular, everybody will know. Leo, Carol Willesee, will be offered several acting roles. Virgo, Brian Henderson. In the next 18 months, adios, Channel 9. Oh, that didn't happen. He was a newsreader, a very popular newsreader, who stayed with Channel 9. Libra, Neville Wran. New attempts to victimise him next year. He was the Premier of New South Wales. Scorpio, Don Lane. A magnificent offer at the end of December 86. Sagittarius, Carrie Packer, will be ecstatic over a huge deal next August. Capricorn, Ita Buttrose, may sever a professional association with a man. Aquarius, Ronald Reagan. More health problems in November. Pisces, John Cornell, may be hindered by red tape and delays of royalties. Aries, Terry Willesee, bigger pay packet, top contender for an award. Taurus, Steve Liebman, may clash with TV chiefs in early November. Gemini, John Newcomb, will make a lot of money in a speculative deal. Cancer, Mike Willesee, an investment could turn into a nightmare. Well, there you go. And as you can see, I guess this 4-page lift out from all those years ago was an attempt to fill pages because it's just light-hearted stuff. There's no substance here. It's scarcely journalism. But as we've seen lately, this sort of thing still goes on today. TV shows, newspapers will still have their astrologer, even in 2024. Yes, it's a commentary on our society, isn't it? But you too can find out about the stars, what they predicted for years ago. Did they come true? Were astrologers on the money? If you go to Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, or maybe your local library or other online resources for newspapers and so on, have a look, do some research, because when you do that, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast this week. I wonder what the upcoming week will bring us all by the way of news. Who knows? But I wouldn't be at all surprised if there's some reasonably dramatic news coming out of Washington. Well, we shall see. Now, here's a message for people listening in Australia. If you would like to nominate somebody for this year's Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon Award, now is the time to do so. I will add a link in this week's show notes at skepticzone.tv. Now, the Bent Spoon is awarded every year for the perpetrator of the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudoscientific piffle. In other words, in the view of the Australian skeptics, who in the media or an organisation, a notable person, you get the idea, has done the most to promote, what shall we say, far-fetched ideas, pseudoscience. There's another word floating around. Anyway, have a look. You can see the past year's winners going back nearly 40 years or over 40 years. And we are looking for nominations. I think the Channel 7 TV news will be getting listed very shortly, probably within the next week, from nominations coming in for running the astrology segment. And of course, the Bent Spoon Award will be announced at the Australian Skeptics National Convention in November, and very soon we'll be giving you lots more details about how you can buy tickets, more details about the speakers. But if you are in Australia, you can look forward to that convention, November in Sydney. A big thank you to my wonderful Patreon and PayPal supporters who make the show possible, and to those new supporters who have only just come on board recently. A special thank you. Now, we won't have time for the after party this week. The show is running long for the dice game after the music, so I'll do one quickly now. Ready? Guess a number. Predict a number between 1 and 10. I have a D10 die here. Here we go. I'm going to predict 7. Here it comes. 10. Well. For this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.